Chris.
And we are Loving the Outcome. Welcome to our podcast.
We're a husband and wife who rock out together.
We're parents of Milo and Ziggy.
And we're following Jesus as best we can.
Our story began in Winnipeg, Manitoba, where we fell in love, got married, and decided to sell everything and travel in our Jetta, selling CDs out of the trunk of our car.
The road led us to Nashville, where we signed a record deal, started our family, and now the four of us travel together in our minibus, White Neptune.
I know, crazy, right? Our life is a road trip.
And we want to invite you into it.
So come along for the ride as we chat with some of our favorite people about family, spirituality, wellness,
and of course, music.
Come on, let's go. Hi, friends. Merry Christmas. Well, I really couldn't let this season roll by without doing a Christmassy episode, but this is not the woohoo, here's my list of the 10 top ways to make your spirit bright and your tree perfect and your Christmas dinner just absolutely the same as the Magnolia magazine, even though that would be awesome. This is an episode about being vulnerable and how Christmas and vulnerability pair together. This is an episode that is all about Emmanuel. What does it actually mean this Christmas to be where we are and trust that Emmanuel, God, is with us in it? What does it mean to change our prayer from God, deliver me from all my problems and make this a perfect Christmas to praying a prayer of, can you just hold me through and be with me in everything that I'm going through? It's been a hard year for so many of us. You know my story, you know my family's journey with our flooded house and being in a different place that is not our home necessarily this Christmas, but how do we do Christmas this year? And how does Emmanuel, God with us, meet us in the place we're in? So I want this episode to give you permission to be where you are and to trust that God, Emmanuel, is going to meet you there. And I've invited my new friend, Leslie Trovato, who is a writer, a lover, a fighter. If you are an Enneagram person, she's a 1 wing 2. She's a mama. She just sent her oldest off to college in Nashville. She is divorced. This is her 3rd Christmas as herself in her home. She has dealt with breast cancer, and she has an amazing blog that you're going to want to subscribe to, a newsletter she sends out. And she describes it as one beautiful, messy life is made up of a million small affairs. Leslie Trovato on Instagram, you're going to want to follow her at Leslie Trovato. That's LESLIETROVATO. And I'll link all of the ways you can hang with her in the show notes. She's been a gift to me on social media. And let's be honest, not everybody or everything is a gift on social media, but the way that she is not scared to be who she is and where she is and put the most beautiful, eloquent words to it has just been a gift. And I follow her and read her religiously. And I think you're going to want to as well. So here is my conversation about Christmas, vulnerability, and what it means for God to be with us now with Leslie Trovato. Hi, Leslie. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, good morning.
I am so thrilled to sit and have tea with you.
Me too. Here it is. Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers. I love it. I love it. I met you and I really fell in love with your writing and just your vulnerability on social media. And we've never even had tea in person. Like, this is the closest to real life we've gotten. Mm-hmm. New friends, really new friends. And I just randomly was like, hi, like, you're speaking to me into my life, and you're more kind of okay with being messy and vulnerable online than a lot of people are. And it's Christmas. And I feel like in my life, everything that already was hard is way harder. It's like just everything is times a million at Christmas, you know? And it's been a year for everybody. Like, there's nobody that hasn't felt loss, hasn't felt grief and pain in some form or some fashion. And I know I have, and our listeners know the journey that I've been on with my family, but just also just me as a human being, balancing, that being a Christian doesn't mean you stop being human. Like, we're human beings, and just trying to let that show. So it's been real for me this year. It's been hard. You can see our
this was a fully lit Christmas tree at some point, but I'm realizing just as I sat down to talk to you, I'm like, it's a half lit tree and that's about perfect.
Yes.
So all that to say, I just really wanted to have a conversation with you about the intermingling of vulnerability and Christmas, and just about how hard the holidays can be, why it's not always like the most glamorous, fun thing that we all, think maybe it should be. I want to talk about expectations and all of those things, because that's what you love to share. And I think it would be so life-giving and really help people today feel like seen and loved. And that's what we all want, right? So thank you for this gift. And with that context in mind, do you mind just starting with your story and just sharing with me and with everybody just who you are, where you come from, and where you are right now?
Yeah, totally. And thank you so much for having me on. This is so fun. I was really excited. So I do have a passion for sharing my story, particularly speaking to women. I've been doing that, writing and speaking in women's ministry capacities for like years and years, and it's really my favorite. I think a lot of writers are introverts and they just want to sit behind a computer and write, and I am so not. I want to be out talking to women and engaging with women, and it's like really my favorite. So any chance to like interact with someone and with your community, it feels like a huge privilege, especially post COVID, and like everybody's been holed up, not doing their normal things for a couple of years. So
yeah,
really appreciate that.
Yes.
I am definitely a recovering hardcore perfectionist, very high expectations person. I grew up in LA County, Los Angeles County, and then we moved down south to Orange County, and that's where I raised my kids most of the way through. And then at some point we decided to move to Montana. So now we live in Bozeman, Montana. Huge culture shock, massive shift. Yeah. It was a job-oriented choice. And I'm really glad my kids got the experience of living here and there, two totally different lifestyles, really. But once we got here, things got really difficult. Things that were already hard and already brewing were exacerbated by a lot of different things. And eventually, my husband and I got divorced, and here I am. Like, I'm in this tiny little cottage house. My daughter has now gone off to college. I have raised one entire human, is what I say. Like, I can't even believe it.
Amazing.
And she's actually in your town in Nashville, and I'm extremely jealous.
So the two of us could have tea parties.
You could, and I would be horribly jealous. So my daughter is now 19 and my son is 16. And he's still in high school here, finishing up high school. He's a junior, and he's a really, really fantastic human too. So my life has gone through so many transitions, and I have walked with God, been a believer through that whole time. And it's just so crazy to look back on how it's all kind of morphed and evolved. And my perspective on even just things like celebrating and Christmas has changed so much over the years. And I really, I do have compassion on my younger mama self. I remember just wanting things to be so just a certain way. I had this very specific vision for how I was going to be an intentional parent and how I was going to teach them all the Bible stories and really bring in the meaning of everything. And that was exhausting. And the standards that I put on myself and that the culture puts on us. And we were living in Southern California where the pace is so intense. And to keep up with it all, it just laid me out sometimes, So what's funny is I asked my kids a couple days ago, in light of this podcast coming on, I was like, hey, I just wanted to like get their memories. Like, what do you remember? What did you love about Christmas our traditions or whatever, like as a kid. And it was so funny. I got such different answers. My daughter, who's 19, was like, she just listed all the things. Like, I just loved when we would drive and go see the lights on the houses. And our one tradition was, I let them pick out one ornament a year. We could go to Target or wherever, they get to choose one ornament, and then they have a box. So by the time they graduate, they have one box of ornaments to like take into their life.
That's special.
Yeah. And so she remembered kind of things like that. She remembered one time we moved the couch like to a different location so that we could use the projector and project a movie onto the wall. I mean, we could have watched it on the TV, but we just did something different. And she remembers it because it was novel, and we changed things up, and we watched White Christmas. She loved that. So, and my son says that his main memory is that I wouldn't let them leave their bedrooms until the clock said 8. And he was like, well, I just remember, like he's giving me a negative memory, basically, that my rules were such that like once they got old enough to read clocks, I guess, I was like, yep, you guys can't come downstairs until 8 because mom and daddy are sleeping. We're not like super early morning folks. And
good
so,
good rule.
I know. And I thought, in hindsight, I wasn't like a mean mother. It's okay it's not the worst to have a little bit of boundaries, like for honoring yourself in Christmas. You're so spent, right?
Yeah.
And
totally.
And the expectation is that you give and give and give and give and give. And somehow you're supposed to survive that.
Somehow you are. And you're supposed to be smiley and positive too.
We're kind of reflect the love of you.
Oh yeah. Oh, exactly. Like, doesn't matter what's happening behind closed doors, but when you leave those doors, you need to be reflecting all the joy and the positivity and Jesus, but who knows what's really going on, right? Why are we so obsessed with being positive?
I don't know. I think because if we bring our real stuff to the surface, it makes the other person need to sort of face theirs. And so if I just show up and you say, how are you? And I'm dying on the inside, but I feel pressure to say, fine, everything's great. It's because there's this unspoken expectation that like, I don't want to cause anyone discomfort by bringing up the fact that we're all struggling, that we're all, and we don't know where there are safe places to bring that out.
So, because your post made me really reflect on, I'm going to actually quote you because I think you just posted it today. To feel vulnerable is to fit right into the Christmas story, aching and wishing for the impossible while seeing everything that's missing. And I just thought, wow, literally the way Jesus came invites vulnerability. Like the setting, the messiness, a dirty stable, all of it, as a child, as a baby, as someone in need, like incapable of doing anything on his own, like just all of it. The picture you painted for me was such a beautiful way of giving ourselves permission to be vulnerable and where we really are this Christmas. And I thought that was a beautiful gift. So you're right. Like we can't just bypass everything. We can't just, spiritual bypassing, something I think I did a lot of, and I still fight against all the time. Just slap a verse on it, put on that positive, happy face, go out to that Christmas Eve service, lead some beautiful worship, and just kind of bypass all the pain and the grief. How have you, like just hearing your story, Christmas, and you said post-divorce, and all of these things, a new location, when your oldest moved out, there's just so many changes in your life. Like, how have you fought the temptation to look like you have it all together, or to not be as perfect or worry about being as perfect? How have you given yourself permission to be where you are?
Yeah. Well, it's been a really, really long process and a really long story. I mean, I'm 47, so I'm maybe older than, a lot of your community, but like I have mothered for 19 years and I was married for 22 years. 22. And I got married when I was 22, got divorced when I was 44. And so I just look at my story as this long, long book, like these chapters that God's been writing, right? And it has asked me to partner with him in writing these chapters. And when I look back on those years that I just had such an intense vision and like expectations for how I wanted my life to go, all the way down to what we were going to do for Advent or whatever, I really was thinking, when I knew we were going to have this conversation, I really took time to think about, well, what changed? What caused the transformation? Because really that's what it is, right? There's like a slow process. And I realized there's really only one thing, because if you just try hard to be real, it's just trying hard in a different way, right?
Yes.
You could try hard to be perfect, or you could try hard to really embrace your mess. Both of those are just a striving, and is that it was really going badly. My marriage was really messy. There was increasing emotional abuse. And in those years when I had my little kids, we were still in California, I was so sad. It was really, really painful. And I think that the reason I was trying to keep everything in this tidy box was as a coping mechanism for the chaos I was feeling inside. And so all of the pain, though, was pushing me to the ground, literally. Like I ended up on the carpet night after night after everyone went to bed, just weeping and crying out to God. And I ran out of things to pray. I just stopped. I stopped praying. I had to. I had nothing else. I was like, here I am, God, just take me. Like that. I don't know what to do with this pain, the loneliness that I felt and the abandonment. All of it. Like, how did I get here? Like, how is this my life? And I think it was just a pivotal moment of starting to listen instead of talk at God and try to micromanage everything in my life. I just started to listen. And I don't think that I really prayed at God or talked at God for like 5 years after that. All I did was just sat and said, what do you want to say to me? Who do you say I am? Remind me who I am.
Wow.
And that changed everything. I mean, ultimately, that releasing of our grip on everything, I think really only truly comes as you learn how loved you are. It's a transition between knowing intellectually that you're loved by God to experiencing his love in a different way, in a way where you are completely laid out in your own broken life and world and heart. Like my brokenheartedness is what finally allowed me to open up to God loving me in a new way and experiencing that. And I think big picture, that the more you learn how beloved you are, the more the rest of the stuff just isn't as important. Your priorities change. They have to. Yeah. They have to change. Because you know that he has you. And it doesn't matter so much anymore that you're in that filthy stable and that you're in the middle of a scandal and that there's hatred around you and upheaval and all the things that I've been writing about lately around, December time is giving me all these thoughts. Like it almost doesn't matter because he's there and you've understood his presence in a new way. And feeling beloved and experiencing belovedness allows you to love yourself in a new way too, and let go of all of that hustling for your worthiness, that hustling for like, I am the one, it's all on me. I have to hold this all together.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially as moms, we're professionals at that.
Yes.
Because you do have to hold a certain amount of things in terms of getting out the door. Like there's just real life things that you are in charge of. And so it's really easy to think you're in charge of it all.
Yes.
And it's really easy to think that it's transactional. And it's not. It's nothing that, do you think there's any way to get to the place you're describing of knowing your belovedness, to knowing God's present, not just in your head, but literally like as a life-saving experience without suffering?
Ooh, that's such a good question. It reminds me of that book. Have you ever read the book Hind's Feet on High Places?
Yes, I read it this year.
You did?
But I read it this year. Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's like, 100 years old or something. It has sold like millions of copies. But what I read it in my like darkest, hardest season. And what struck me the most, it's an allegory for those of you who don't know. It's about a girl named Much Afraid who is trying to get up to the top of the mountain. So it's the whole book is a metaphor, right? And it like gutted me when I got to the part where she realizes that she has to hold hands with two people to go up the mountain, and their names are sorrow and suffering. Right? Yeah. And she like panics. She's like, wait a minute. Why can't you give me different companions? Like, why can't you give me joy and gratitude? And I don't remember exactly what she suggests, but she's like, no, I don't want to go with them. Like, I don't want them to be my companions. And isn't it the Good Shepherd? He's like, no, this is the only way. Like, these are the companions that will take you there.
Yeah.
And that just, it wrecks me.
Me too.
So I don't know.
If there was another way, if there was only another way, deep love and deep sorrow and suffering. And it's almost like you break apart, but you break open, and there's actually more space, and more love. And it's almost like I felt anyway that being in such in need, like a needy place, and not being the one on the other end of the phone, being there for people, but having people be there for me, and having God be there for me, and just allowing some of what you're describing to happen. The gift in it is now I see people differently, and I see who's left out, and I can when I never would have noticed, or I never would have paid attention. And it's not even that I'm trying to pay attention. I'm just broken open. There's just more space to love myself, to be loved, and to love others.
Right. Yes.
And it's transformational, and it's so hard, and it's so gutting, but it's the way up the mountain. I don't know another way in my life. And I've prayed for other ways, like I've prayed, in desperate moments, like, God, take me out of this situation, but it's always, I'll take you through.
Right.
It's always, I'll take you
through. Right through the center.
Yeah.
And I think,
yeah, you go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that if this were me hearing this several years ago, I think I would have thought, well, I've had such a great life, and I had a really good upbringing, and my marriage has its normal struggles. Like I was not in reality with a lot of the suffering.
Wow.
And so I think with like, if someone's listening to this thinking, oh, well, I don't need to go to my deepest, darkest place in life before I can know God and walk with God. That's not quite what we're saying. I think that there's something about opening ourselves up to more of the story that's already happened or is currently happening.
More of reality, actually.
That's yes. And that's one thing I was so afraid of, I realized when coming to terms with how rough my marriage actually was, is I had spiritually bypassed so much of it. And I hit this moment where I was like, okay, if God lives in the center of truth and the center of reality, then I'm the one who's not in it. And all he's ever doing is inviting me towards him. And that means I'm always being invited towards reality and more truth. So through the course of, like, we had a year and a half separation-ish, different things, I would just wake up and pray, okay, God, today, just bring me one step closer to you, where you live in the center of the truth, in the center of reality. And several times I would like find out something or have this realization of something that was not good, but it was God saying, I'm over here. I'm in the center of the reality. I'm safe here. It's safe in reality. You're not going to be lost or overwhelmed by it.
Do you think part of the reason for, and I don't know how you grew up, I know for me, when I don't choose to live in the center of truth in reality and to see things for what they are, part of it is because I'm sort of dealing with what I think my life should be and what I was told it should be, what being a good Christian woman was and is, and trying to honor that more than honor myself.
100%.
And more than honoring God, honestly. Yes. But honoring this picture of the perfect, ideal Christian woman. Was that part of it for you?
Yes. If not all of it. I mean, honestly, I wasn't conscious of those things, of course. Like, I wasn't conscious of the way a lot of my sort of conservative evangelical upbringing. I was raised in a Baptist church in California, and just the content that I consumed, the books I read, the Bible studies I was in, all the things, I did all of it. And I did not realize how it had harmed me in a lot of ways. And so I do have that baggage, and that's constantly unraveling for me. The expectations placed on women is a passion of mine. The burdens on us, as Christian, they're unreal. And I just think, when I read the Bible, when I read about Jesus and how he interacts with women, how he treats women, it just makes me feel so motivated to teach that. It's not what I was taught. It's so much more honoring and loving and just respectful of women's voices, women's place. And their worth. Their inherent worth. So I did get a lot of messaging about, a husband legitimizing your voice and marriage legitimizing you, and especially in church, especially in leadership. And it was all reinforced up until, very recently. And so, I am passionate about all of those pieces.
And thank goodness that you are. There's not very many women that see what you see and share honestly from that place, because it feels like going against the grain. It is. I mean, it is going against the grain of how most of us grew up. Like, you're not the ultimate woman unless you have a man by your side and children. It's incomplete. It's an incomplete picture, and to the point that we don't trust ourselves.
Yes.
We don't. And, reading scripture my whole life and then kind of going through this, like, wait, I have worth and value, just me, just who I am, for being in Christ, and really stopping to understand, not just say it, but like, really, what does this mean? What is my identity? Where does my worth come from? Where does it not come from? And all the verses that, you know, don't lean on your own understanding, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean on your own understanding. I started picking those apart and letting myself question, which was hard to do because it felt like something that had been taught to me since I was 3. I just memorized these verses and interpreted them incorrectly. And it really affects the way we see ourselves, the way we see God, you know? And it's like, I don't know if you relate to this, but trusting myself, and I think that we probably have some similarities on that path of just like, what does that mean? What does it mean to give myself a vote? And to know that God trusts, like, not just to go with what being a good wife is supposed to be and choosing that, even if it's unhealthy, to still choose that instead of choosing to trust ourselves in our gut and to listen. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. I've thought through that a lot too. It's funny, you're like bringing up all the things like that I've processed in the past couple of years, because they've just been such turning points for me. But especially in a relationship where there is emotional abuse and a lot of anger and a lot of emotional violence, I think the way that you learn to cope and the way you learn to survive that is just kind of managing things for someone else. Does that make sense? And so you lose yourself really quickly in that, and you forget that you have agency and you have preferences, and it's okay to be your own individual. And so when we finally were divorced a couple of years ago, it was a huge, logistically, I had to make so many choices on my own. Where I was going to live, I needed a car, I needed a new job, like all the biggest kinds of decisions in your life, I was doing on my own for the first time. And it was so hard, but it was such a training ground. Like God had me in such a training ground of like, you can do this and you can trust your gut, and I am in your heart. So the verse, even that verse from Proverbs about lean not on your own understanding, he addressed that to me one day. I was talking to him and he said something like, you have so much familiarity with like hearing from me now. Like, this is not your first rodeo in our relationship. This is now a long-standing relationship you and I have. You know how to hear me. You know what correction feels like. So when God basically was saying, when my heart becomes your heart, then you can trust in your own understanding, because it's not that it's perfect, of course, like I'm still human, but I didn't need to be so afraid of myself, so afraid of making those mistakes.
Yes. Right.
Safe. He was like, it's so safe. If you do make a mistake, great. We'll figure that out. We'll work through it. Right. But there's freedom in there. And that was just such a parenting point for him and me, you know? And it was very humbling and humiliating, actually, more than humbling. It was humiliating to feel like, as in my 40s, I was just learning these things. So,
I feel like that all the time. Like, wow, really? I couldn't have figured this out earlier. Or my mom and I talk about that all the time. She's like, I'm just learning how to trust myself now. Like, what's my deal? What's my problem? But that's just not that. Yeah. Life just happens as it happens. And as we can see, we see more and we see more and we lean in, and there is no timeline of shoulda, coulda, but it's so hard to not shame yourself over where you are in life. It's almost impossible for me to not shame myself for the things that have gone differently or, in my opinion, wrong. And to not even name them wrong, or like it's all my fault. Like, when I made that decision there, I guess God was actually leading me here, but I went here. For the longest time, I saw things that way. I missed it. I missed the boat there. it's all on me that it turned out this way. When in fact, like that scripture tells us, like, you go to the right or the left, I'm there. Like that is just not the way, like you said, which is actually perfect. Cause I wanted to talk about Emmanuel because he posted a lot about that. And that, I mean, the word God with us is God with us, like in this present moment.
Right. That's so my favorite name.
Yeah. Like it's not a matter of getting it right. You know, like I missed the boat. I got like, oh, well, like even if maybe that could have been a better choice over there, God is with us in it all. So yeah, what is that word? What does it actually mean to you, Emmanuel, God with us? What does that mean to you right now?
I think it means a couple of things. Like I see it a couple different ways. I see it, I think, yes, his presence, you know, we kind of always have understood, well, he's with you, God is with you, he's with you wherever you go. And it becomes so familiar, it loses its meaning to an extent. And so I try to think of it in terms of the fact that he was physically born and like took on flesh and came as a human. And that makes him with us in a different way that a spirit is with us. The fact that Jesus, like walked on this earth, touched people who had leprosy, like he did things in a body and he had a body and that body had aches and pains and he bled and, you know, he felt the depths of loneliness, the depths of rejection, the depths of abandonment. So when I was going through my deepest pains, to know that he was with me in that in a way that like he felt these things even more than I did, like experienced it even worse than I did, the worst possible relational heartache imaginable. And that is incredibly comforting to me. In fact, I'm not sure I could have made it through emotionally without that Emmanuel sense of like, you know how this feels. And there's like a witness in that, in his compassion, like the depth of his compassion. It's not sympathy. It's not God in heaven looking down and saying, that must be really hard for you. Oh, I'm so sorry that happened. No, it's him in it in a way that he tangibly experienced and feels what we feel. He felt it. He felt it worse. And he felt it first. So that compassion and witness in our pains is, I guess, what it means to me in those hardest moments.
Man, I feel like everybody listening right now is just like letting their shoulders relax a little bit more and like, I am. It's so what I want this season to be about, you know, not all of the expectations and perfectionism and things that they're there. So, but how we engage, what we choose to engage with and not engage with, what we choose to focus on, that's what I want to receive and be in and about and in a flow of this Christmas season, Emmanuel.
Right.
Like, I feel like, for me, depending on the place I'm in, the season I'm in, and what I'm going through, my circumstance, it's like I need God in new ways, in different ways than I've never needed God before. So like, I would always say like, oh, I want to have to depend on you, God. I want to know you, but I didn't, or I want to know you as dependable, but I would never depend on God. Like I would just do my own thing. And then in this season of needing to know, or I want to know you as provider, but I'm really good at providing for myself. So that's a big one for me. Like I just go provide for myself, go work really hard, go do my thing under the banner of responsibility. And so then I never knew God as much as provider. But in this season, I have needed his provision and his closeness so differently than I ever have before, that Emmanuel means something different to me this year. Yeah. And I'm wondering for you, in the season of life that you're in and in this Christmas, who is God to you? How do you feel withness and the closeness and the presence this year?
That's a good question. I think that's another question I think about a lot. I think of it in terms of like, I've been to church my whole life, and from the pulpit, I've heard a bunch of metaphors about God. God's your father, God's your best friend, God's your helper. All of those kinds of metaphors that we hear from the pulpit and in books and messages. And the one I feel like he's met me in and been to me the most, I've never heard a message on, but it's God as my husband, because that was my area of need. That was the area of my deepest hurt and my deepest abandonment. And he showed up to, in a way, husband me in a lot of ways, actually. And it really got me thinking, like, okay, why aren't we taught this? Why is that metaphor never coming up? Because in the Bible, I see a lot of places where it refers to us as his bride and talks about, there's almost these like romantic implications in a lot of different places. And I think it's because most of the people teaching us are males, and they maybe don't relate to that metaphor as much as God as a husband, because that's just not something that they're more likely to relate to him as a father or a brother or a friend.
Wow.
Or an authority figure. And so
that's a big one. Mm-hmm.
So leaning into allowing God to husband me and learning his tenderness and his kindness and his generosity to me and his provision versus the years and years that I heard about him as the king and the warrior and the father and all of those things. Well, I didn't necessarily need those metaphors, him to show up as those things in my life. Like, what I needed was tenderness. What I needed was an intimate love. And that's exactly what he, shows up as for me. One of my best friends, she lost her mother at a young age, and that's how God shows up for her, is as a mother and as a nurturer and a comforter and a soft place to land. Love that. I think it's very unique to our stories, and I never want to put him in a box, because he knows the places where our hearts are the most bruised. And I think when Jesus said he came to heal, he wasn't kidding.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right, Leslie, you're just getting me today. Oh my goodness, you're right. I just always think, oh, that's for someone else, or God came to heal only the big things, or I don't know, the physical things, but no, he knows every single wound, every single hurt, feels it, experiences it, is with us. It reminds me of something that you said. I wrote down so many of there's too many things to write down because you post and write so beautifully. It's such a gift. I always want God to solve my personal problems, but he came to be with me, keep me, and hold me through them. And that's even better. That's literally my prayer for every person listening. That is having a different Christmas, maybe the most different Christmas, the hardest Christmas, the most grief and loss filled Christmas. I mean, it's just a different Christmas no matter what for all of us with the last couple of years that we've all had. And I love your words. That's my prayer, that we would allow God to hold us and be with us through, not just to solve our problems. And I mean, we can pray whatever's on our heart. There's no rules about how we pray. And I've prayed so many of those prayers, just help me right now with this. And that's, yes, all of the prayers, but we have to allow God to take us up the mountain. And if we really do want to be healed, then we have to allow ourselves to be held and to go through instead of just be fixed and taken taken out of our problems, right? Like we just can't really escape it. And so maybe this Christmas can be that gift, like the start of that for somebody, even if it's the hardest Christmas they've ever had.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And just so you know, that isn't a perfect example of me preaching to myself in my own words, because that is very hard for me. To say those words, that it's actually better. I'm trying to convince myself it's better that God's with me in my problems instead of solving them, because honestly, I so want him to solve the problems. Like I so want them solved,
of course,
just to be honest. Like, and I just have to keep preaching to myself in my own heart that it's better that he's with me in them than just solving them, because then I know I'm beloved, instead of, more of a machine that's going.
Like, you're right. That connects. Sorry, I totally didn't mean to like cut you off, but that just connects with me so much. Like, as a mom, that like if your child is going through something, or that we need to make a bit of a pivot, it's not usually a quick thing.
Right.
It's usually a slow thing. And it's patience and love and togetherness. Like that's how that healing happens. It's not quick.
Totally.
And
that's why that's why when I look back, like the contrast of like the then Christmas and the now Christmas, like the then Christmas when my kids were little, I have this like specific memory of like really wanting to read through this one certain Advent book. And it was expensive. And I was like, well, I'm not going to cut corners on Jesus. Like we're going to buy this expensive thing. And this author that I really admired, and they were too little. We sat down, it was way too long. The entries were way too long for them, way too grown up for them. And I just so badly thought, this is the thing, this is the thing that's going to matter. And I'm going to sit here and I'm going to teach them through this book. And, I try to have compassion on that young mom that just thought that was going to be the thing. And we got through like 3 days of it, and they were just so bored, like, so, way too, it was not a fit. And now I think, okay, now my daughter's coming home from college and it's going to be the three of us. And I didn't unpack all of my decorations. I just have my tree and ornaments. I left all the boxes in the garage because I didn't have it in me. And they're going to come here and we're going to make really good food. And we're going to watch dumb Christmas movies. The really old kid ones. Oh, yeah. And like it's the togetherness and also the vulnerability. I'm so vulnerable with my kids these days. Well, age appropriately, of course, or like age appropriate vulnerability, obviously, but just with the ways that I struggle and the ways that I'm afraid and the ways that my body doesn't feel good, I just went through like breast cancer and like had long COVID and like just junk, just regular life stuff. But just saying like, I'm not up for this or that. And, this isn't going to be the priority this year, but this is going to be. And modeling, instead of, this mom that has it all together and is keeping everything in this tidy box, modeling being a mom that is in a transformation process and that can allow herself to change. I can allow my beliefs to change. I can allow my priorities to change. I want my kids to know there's safety in that, that they can be people who are allowing themselves to be transformed, that they don't have to hold on to their same ideas year after year after year, right?
Yes.
So,
yes,
to me, that's the only reason. That's all I've got.
Yes, to all that you just said. I mean, yes to all of it. That's all I can say. That is like every person, every friend I have are going to quote that back to me, what you just said, and hold on to it, because sometimes you need someone else to give you permission, and then you start to give yourself permission. You know, you just need to hear someone else say it, and then maybe you start going, oh, okay, maybe that's me too. You know, maybe I'm allowed to exactly like cry in front of my kids or share where I'm really at with my kids and let them know that when they're crying, that they're not weird, that it's normal, you know, some of these things. And I love everything you said. I love the gifts that you've given us today. I'm so grateful. I have to run and pick up my kid. Ziggy's done in about 20 minutes. And so I'm like, oh, I guess I should be there.
That's a good idea.
Forever. I just all of a sudden looked, I'm like, oh, I've been talking to you, I feel like 10 minutes. It's just been such a gift to me. Thank you, Leslie, so much for just please, like, I know that there's days you might not want to, like, vulnerability can be tiring, or I find it to be. And thank you for just reminding us, like, it's okay to say, you know, I don't have it in me. I don't have it in me. This Christmas.
We're finite. We're finite.
Yeah. I think that we all need to hear that. Like, this Christmas, it's okay to say, we can't afford this. Can't afford this Christmas. That is allowed. Like, I don't know why we think it's not, but it is. And it's okay to say, I don't have it in me this year, you know, because it makes space for something else, which is beautiful. It does. So thank you so much for all that you shared, all the wisdom and just your bravery, your vulnerability, what Emmanuel means to you. It's just all been so beautiful, and it's going to be a gift to everyone who listens. So before we go, how can people hang out with you and track with you and learn from you?
You can share my Instagram is my main place. And I also have a free, bi-monthly newsletter.
Yes.
My Substack is called Small Affairs.
Okay.
And
that's under your Instagram handle, right? People can click and subscribe.
Link in bio. Yes. And my Instagram handle is, at Leslie.Trovato. So LESLAE.TROVATO.
I'm going to link it all in the show notes. So for anyone listening that went by too quickly, it's all going to be there. Thank you, Leslie, so much. And Merry Christmas.
For those of you that don't know, we have a Patreon. What's Patreon, you're asking? It's basically like a subscription to all things Love and the Outcome. But it's more than that. We give specially created content just for you. We release the podcast early to you. We ask you for your questions and who you want on the podcast. We do worship and prayer nights where it's really specific and one-on-one. There's a whole bunch more things.
We geek out on Love and the Outcome songs and how we made them, how we wrote them.
Bass videos a la Chris Rademacher. So if that's something that sounds fun, you can subscribe. There's a whole bunch of tiers, and for as little as $10 a month, you can get all things Love and the Outcome. So shout out to our patrons that make this podcast possible.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Denise and Emily and Stephanie, Michelle and Greg and Misty, Dr. Scott, Jeremy, Emily, Stacy, Lisa, Rick and Marcel, Mary, Biff, Dad Rad, Rachel, Glynis, Matt, Eva, and Sean.
Become a patron. Go to patreon.com/loveandtheoutcome. And like always, if this podcast is life-giving to you and you're enjoying it, subscribe to it. Share it with a friend. We would love that. Thanks, everyone.
This podcast is brought to you by Hope and Healing International.
For $30 a month, $1 a day, you can sponsor a life-changing surgery for a little boy or girl living in Africa. We're talking about club feet, cleft palates, going from blindness to sight. In 1 year, you can literally send a healing hug and change a child's life.
If you'd like more information, go check out the website at lovehealinghugs.com, and you can see video of our buddy Bernard.
This is my son, Bernard. He wants so much to be and play like the other children. But he can't. Instead, he suffers every day. As a father, I would do anything for my son. I love him, but sometimes this is not enough. They say they can heal my boy. I told them, I work hard, but I have no money to pay for it. They told me someone in Canada is paying to heal my son.
For over 100 years, Hope and Healing International has helped break the cycle of poverty and disability for thousands of children in the poorest communities. But we can't do it alone. For $30 a month, you will directly fund the surgeries, medical care, and rehabilitation for a child who would otherwise go untreated. A child just like Bernard. We will send you a picture of every child you help, their treatment plans, and progress reports. And each child we treat on your behalf will receive this bear to hug on their journey ahead. All you have to do is go online or call now. It's that simple.
Thank you for making my son smile again.